In my early years, I was often misunderstood by those around me. Growing up with Asperger's syndrome in a world where social norms seemed second nature to others made daily interactions challenging. My family, as well-meaning as they were, often struggled to understand my way of seeing things, my literal interpretations, and my unique communication style. From a young age, I found comfort in structure and routines, preferring the order of numbers and facts over the abstract flow of social cues. This difference shaped much of my childhood and education. Teachers noticed my tendency to focus on specific details, while peers labeled me the odd one out for my unique perspective. Over time, however, I developed a talent for analysis and problem-solving, skills that would later be invaluable in my personal and professional life. As I navigated my journey, I found inspiration in book and film characters who, like me, were unique, recognizing myself in their stories of overcoming obstacles. Remember the critically acclaimed film Rain Man? Dustin Hoffman won an Academy Award for his portrayal of Raymond Babbitt, an autistic character with extraordinary skills. Although I'm not as affected, I live with Asperger's syndrome. For the most part, I blend in, though with my own quirks. Unlike many, I struggle to read unspoken social cues, where others might notice subtle hints, like someone checking their watch to end a conversation. I miss those signals. My world is defined by logic, directness, and an adherence to structure, making social situations especially complex. You know people with Asperger's. We're computer nerds, rocket scientists, quirky programmers. Think of Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. I'm precise. As a CNN commentator once wrote, "We usually show little expression in our faces or voices. I can't look you in the eyes. I've learned to look at people's mouths or noses. I can't hold a casual conversation for long, but I can give you a lecture on topics like U.S. atomic bomb tests, Pittsburgh steelworkers, Doberman puppies, or medieval society. We excel in school because we follow rules, which makes us good employees if given specific tasks and goals. But overall, we don't make the best managers. Why a whole week off for a funeral? It's just one day," I once told a boss. Maybe your boss wasn't difficult, just an aspie. My parents passed away when I was young, and I was a constant source of surprise and confusion to my grandparents. They had raised 6 children, none of whom spent as much time in the principal's office as I did, mostly due to the questions I raised in class. I'd ask, "If this is anti-bullying week, what was last week?" Or, "In case of fire, why line up from shortest to tallest? Do tall people burn slower?" And why is Black History Month in February the shortest month? Though I was an excellent student and even received a scholarship, my grandfather often muttered, "There's something not right with this boy." I never dated in high school. Unfamiliar with the mind games and mental tricks girls used on teenage boys, I read everything. My grandfather, a practical military man, hired a courtesan for my 18th birthday. I was thrilled, and like any teenager, I arranged regular visits with her when I could afford it. No good deed goes unpunished. This led to my first big novel. I was filling my gas tank near the shopping center before starting my Meals on Wheels route for seniors. Not because I'm a good person, but as part of my scholarship requirement, and I chose it to avoid other employees. Once I started, I found people fascinating. These seniors had survived the Great Depression, fought in wars, and built our country into an economic powerhouse. I loved hearing their stories. From bootlegging to storming Normandy to union struggles, they were my living history books. They loved to share stories with anyone who would listen. One day, as I paid for gas, a young girl ran past, chased by 2 guys, a big one and a smaller one, a Mutt and Jeff pair. They circled my car several times, which was still parked at the pump. Suddenly, the girl jumped into my car and locked the doors. Mutt and Jeff banged on the hood and roof, yelling at her. The store clerk was calling emergency when I walked over. "Hey, you two," I said to the men who were still yelling at the trapped girl, denting my car. "Back away from my car." The smaller man, whom I mentally called Mutt, looked at me. "This your car?" he asked authoritatively. When I didn't answer, Mutt continued. "Open it, idiot, so we can get this girl." "Not a chance," I replied. "We'll wait for the police. They're already on the way. I need a report for insurance. Plus, you both owe me for the damage. This was my grandmother's car, and she kept it pristine. I washed it every Saturday at 5 p.m. with premium mother's wax." "Shut up, idiot," Jeff snapped, adding, "The cops are already here, so unlock this junk." I looked at Mutt and Jeff. They had no uniforms, no visible badges. "Could I see some ID or badge, please?" Mutt stepped closer. "We don't have time for this," he muttered to Jeff, then grabbed my arm, trying to twist it painfully. Here's where I need to add a little context. Children with Asperger's syndrome are frequently bullied since our physical coordination often develops later. making us the last pick for any team in PE class. Combine that with an inability to respond effectively to teasing and sarcasm, and, well, you get the picture. To counter this, I was enrolled in martial arts early on to improve my coordination, build confidence, and learn to handle bullies. After attending several classes, I found that a modified form of Aikido was the best fit for my training. The Aikido I learned was based mainly on responding to an opponent's movements. I was taught not to react until someone made physical contact, a rule that suited my Asperger's black and white view of the world. Words and ridicule could be ignored, but physical actions allowed a response. I trained 3 times a week and on Saturdays at a local Aikido center. It became like a second home. Fast forward to the present, and Mutt's face showed shock as I countered his arm grab with a move I'd practiced countless times in Aikido class. Dropping to one knee, I spun under his arm, using my weight and his momentum to flip Mutt over my shoulder, leaving him gasping for air. Standing up, I stated, "You touched me first. Please don't try it again." The girl in my car screamed, while behind me Jeff charged forward, arms wide, head down, ready for a football-style tackle. This feels just like my last belt test, I thought as Jeff's fingers neared my hands. I fell backward, raising a leg to kick him in the stomach, and grabbed his outstretched forearms, pulling him down as I pushed off with my foot. Jeff flipped over, landing near a gas pump. Rolling to my feet, I heard the girl in my car laugh. "You two idiots can't even take down one guy. Need more friends before you get hurt?" Her laughter continued, but I stayed serious. These guys weren't backing down. Jeff quickly jumped up, pulling out what looked like a taser. I saw blue sparks flash and heard the electric buzz. We'd never trained against tasers, but I treated it like a sharp weapon, dodging and weaving to keep Jeff off balance. When I had the right opening, I moved to his side, struck his elbow upwards, and directed the wrist holding the taser downward. Jeff yelped as his hand and the taser dunked into a bucket of windshield washer fluid. I didn't know the exact properties of windshield fluid, but apparently, it conducts electricity well. Over 1,500 volts surged through Jeff's hand and into his body. He convulsed, collapsing by the bucket with his hand still submerged, limbs twitching. Then Mutt charged at me again, this time wielding a collapsible baton. I hopped over Jeff, who was still spasming, and pulled out a wooden-handled scraper from the bucket. Mutt wasn't skilled with the baton, making it easy for me to parry his attacks. I hooked his ankle with the scraper's T-end, causing him to stumble backward. The girl in my car laughed again, but her laughter stopped when Mutt lifted his pant leg to reveal an ankle holster. He pulled out a .38 caliber pistol, aiming it at me. "Stop, idiot," he barked. "I'm serious." In Aikido, we train to defend against different weapons. The advice was, run from a knife, rush a tool. A knife can't injure you from a distance, but a tool can. So, I advanced toward Mutt, crouching low. 2 shots fired, and the back window of my car shattered, the girl inside screaming. Mutt looked stunned as I closed in, disarmed him, and had him on the ground just as 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing. Officers leapt out, tools drawn, ordering me to drop my weapon. I released the pistol and raised my hands, but Mutt seized the moment to kick me in the head, and everything went dark. I'll spare you the details, but I spent over 24 hours in a jail cell after Mutt and Jeff handcuffed me to a chair and knocked me severely. It wasn't like in the movies. They didn't let me make a phone call or tell me you have the right to remain silent, as you see in police shows. I think Mutt and Jeff were actual cops, because they were the ones who knocked me while I was cuffed to the chair. After that, the other prisoners left me alone. Apparently, knocking 2 cops earns respect. On the second day, the jailers, who had been indifferent until then, suddenly grew uneasy. Some tried to emphasize they had treated me the same as any other suspect and had no part in what happened earlier. "Anthony," a jailer called, opening the cell door. "Come with me, please." Crossing the threshold, I was surprised to see the girl from my car waiting with an older, distinguished-looking man. The jailer fidgeted as he led me to them. "Here he is, Judge. Your Honor, he's in fine condition. We've kept him safe, just as I said." The judge ignored the jailer and grabbed my chin, turning my head to examine the bruises on my face, lingering on the ugly mark on my cheek from Jeff's repeated hits with a phone book. The girl began taking photos with her phone. "Yes, I'd say he looks very good," she said. "How many of you did it take?" She looked at the bruises on my wrists from the handcuffs. "You must be proud of knocking up a handcuffed man. The Fuhrer would be impressed." The judge waved off both her and the jailer. "That's enough." Then he turned to me and said, "Come on, son, let's get to work on taking these guys down." With that, the judge turned and walked out, and the girl and I followed him. We sat outside the police commissioner's office, watching men in suits move in and out, carrying papers and forms. I hadn't seen the judge since he'd gone in. "Would you like something to drink?" the administrative assistant asked. "Yes, watermelon juice," I replied. "Watermelon juice?" she repeated, surprised. "You said anything," I reminded her. "Well, we only have soda, tea, and coffee. No watermelon juice." I paused. "So when you said anything, you didn't really mean it? Only soda, tea, and coffee? That's misleading." The girl stepped in confidently. "We'll both have a soda. Any kind. Thanks." She nudged me toward a chair. "Relax, dude." "Are you an idiot or something?" I shot back. She raised an eyebrow. "I may not know what an idiot is, but I was just helping this lady be clearer. That's how wars got started back in 1607. "Wow, you're clueless," I interrupted, smirking. "But kinda cute. Now shut up. Don't you want to know what happened after the cops showed up at the gas station?" "I assume you're going to tell me," she replied, unfazed. "Isn't that why you're here at the police station?" She rolled her eyes, then extended a hand. "Anyway, I'm Dawn." I pointed to her ID sticker. "But your badge says New Dawn." "Technically, yes," she sighed. "My parents were into crystal energy, so they named me New Dawn. But you can just call me Dawn." "Fine. Can I call you Tony?" "Sure, if you want, but I probably won't answer since my name's Anthony," I replied. Dawn chuckled. "Okay, Anthony. Look, those two goons were after me because they thought I was shoplifting. Were you actually stealing?" Dawn gave me an innocent look. "Yeah, maybe." She shrugged. "It's not like a massive store like that would go broke over a few items. Do you know how little these corporations pay in taxes or how poorly they treat their employees? Not to mention child labor overseas." "What does that have to do with you stealing?" I asked. "This store's a franchise, so you were really stealing from a small family-owned business, not a big corporation." "Whatever," Dawn waved dismissively. "Aren't you even mad that the city's police force is full of corrupt flunkies living off our tax dollars? Like those two Nazis who came after you?" "They're an outlier," I replied. Dawn looked confused. "An outlier?" "In any large organization, public, private, or religious, you'll find about 11% who are high performers driving growth, 86% doing the minimum required, and 3% that break down into two groups. 2% are corrupt, willing to do anything to get ahead, and 1%, the dead weight, people who just take up space." I held up two fingers. "I just happened to be first in the wrong place at the wrong time. 10 minutes earlier or later, I wouldn't have been involved. Second, I ran into two cops who don't represent the rest." Dawn started to speak, but I held up my hand. "Look, the average police officer makes about the same as the average worker, not rich. They're there to enforce laws. If you disagree with the law, work to change it or the officials who make it. Don't blame the ones enforcing it. That's all I'll say on the topic." I looked at her. "Please, go on. How did you end up here?" Dawn shook her head. "You're definitely one of a kind, Anthony. Anyway, after the other cops arrived, they were so busy with you that I managed to sneak away and hide at a nearby gas station. I saw those two officers go in, take the security tape, and threaten the store clerk." She held up her phone, grinning. "They had no idea I was recording them the whole time." "You mean they didn't identify themselves as police when they first attacked me?" I asked. "Exactly. I even got them on camera threatening the clerk. I noticed all the Meals on Wheels food in your car, so I called the organization and explained what happened." She smirked. "Told them to send lawyers, tools, and money, just like the song." She glanced at the commissioner's door. "Did you know the judge is on the Meals on Wheels board?" I nodded. "Yes, he's also the district's chief judge and the state's majority political leader. He spoke at my high school graduation." Dawn's eyes widened. "Well, that explains a lot. Once I called, state patrol cars showed up. They took your car and brought me to the judge's office. He was furious when he saw the footage from my phone. It was like a royal court. People showed up in the middle of the night, some even in tuxedos. Then he called in more top officials, all to get you out." Dawn gently touched the bruise on my cheek. "Those two cops planned to lose you in the system, delay the paperwork until your bruises healed. Then it would be their word against yours. Not to mention the false charges they'd filed, resisting arrest, attack, possession of pills, the whole 9 yards. They even planted meth in your car." At that moment, the commissioner's assistant reappeared and motioned to me. "Anthony, His Honor will see you now." In the end, both officers were fired and charged. The police commissioner was relieved to let them go, as this wasn't their first complaint. It turned out they were also on the shopping center's payroll while on duty for the department, sealing their fate. Other officers received reprimands, but the judge, commissioner, and district attorney all expressed their thanks to me. I was surprised they couldn't see that the other officers were just acting on what Mutt and Jeff had told them. According to their story, my gang and I had attacked them while they were trying to detain a suspect, supposedly to protect a stash house in my car. This whole situation taught me a lot about how quickly things can break down if trust among these new centurions is gone. The city police settled with me, offering a substantial payment. Raised to live simply, I'd never prioritized money, but I accepted, knowing that a jury wouldn't sympathize with a government agency that invented charges, arrested, and strike a disabled orphan. Yes, Asperger's qualifies as a disability, and I was a scholarship student delivering food to the elderly. About a week later, Dawn appeared at my door. "Come on, Anthony," she said, glancing around my small apartment. "I heard you got a check from the police. Let's take this money and go celebrate." I looked around my one-room apartment. "Dawn, I have a bed, a table, and a small dining area. Maybe it's a bit bare, but it's clean and functional, not exactly a dump." "Fantastic," Dawn replied, irritated. "You live in the Taj Mahal now. Invite me out somewhere nice. I deserve it. Today we're celebrating." "I can't eat anything here," Dawn exclaimed, dropping the menu. We were at one of the city's best steakhouses, a classic place where my grandparents would take me on special holidays. They had the best beef, plus seasonal crabs and lobsters. I looked over my menu at her. "What's wrong with the meat selection?" She looked at me, disgusted. "I'm a vegetarian," she said, pointing to the menu. "Is it possible to eat anything here that hasn't suffered horribly?" "You're a vegetarian?" I asked, and she nodded. Recalling my grandfather's words, I said, "You know, Dawn, the original meaning of vegetarian was bad hunter." Dawn pointed at me. "You don't get it. Nature didn't design us to eat hamburgers." I repeated something else my grandfather used to say. "If nature didn't want us eating hamburgers, why did it make cows so easy to catch? I've never heard of anyone eating cheetah burgers." Dawn looked annoyed. "Humans were never meant to eat meat. Our prehistoric ancestors ate almost entirely wild grains, fruits, and vegetables." I gave her a puzzled look. "But you're not living in prehistoric times. If you were, you'd already be dead. The average lifespan of a cave woman was less than 20 years, with men living about 5 years longer." She waved me off. "No one seems to understand that our ancient ancestors succeeded in hunting only 10% of the time. Hunting was risky. You could break a bone, sprain an ankle, or get injured, which meant a quick end of life without medical help. Without greens and tubers, they'd starve." "Dawn, you're afraid of spiders, and I can't picture you eating termites." She grimaced. "Anthony, that's disgusting." Clasping my hands, I continued. "Cave people got most of their protein from insects. Termites were 38% protein, and one species in Venezuela, Sintermes aculeosus, is 64% protein. Termites are also rich in iron, calcium, and essential fatty acids." Dawn shook her head, waving the menu. "People need to return to natural basics, not this industrial farming mess." Setting down my menu, I said, "So we shouldn't use penicillin or antibiotics, perform surgeries without anesthetics, go back to when childbirth was the leading cause of end of life for women?" "No," Dawn said, "but we should be more self-sufficient." She gestured to the other diners. "I just worry about what everyone eats." I tried to understand her point, but she seemed so firm. "Dawn, being worried about what others eat is like getting angry at someone eating a donut while you're on a diet." Dawn laughed, tossed the menu aside, and said, "I'll get a salad, but desserts on me. At your place?" "Sure," I said, flipping through the menu to show her pictures of desserts. "Today's dessert is homemade key lime pie with whipped cream. Can't think of anything better." "Okay, fine," she said, smirking. "Your dessert idea might just knock key lime pie." It only made sense that if Dawn was my girlfriend, she should live with me. But we couldn't share my small apartment, so I bought a larger place. The settlement from the police made it possible. Money was never my focus, but Dawn seemed to appreciate the things it could provide. I was studying math and accounting. I loved math, but my grandfather had said I needed a practical career, and accountants are always in demand. I never knew exactly what Dawn studied in college. She was always attending rallies and protests on campus, whether for gays for metric native idiot rights, or stop animal testing of rubbers. I didn't follow them, but Dawn was passionate about every march and demonstration, and if it made her happy, that made me happy too. Determined to impress Dawn in bed, I dove into research on women's pleasure, reading articles, watching videos, and even interviewing a friend in the escort business. Purely informational. I'm a committed boyfriend now. Wow, Dawn said, blushing and falling back onto the bed. Where'd you get this idea? I put the toy back in the drawer and explained. A clerk at the Pleasure Palace recommended it. Even gave me a demonstration in the back. It's one of the top-rated ones. Dawn stared at me, then burst out laughing. You're probably the only guy who'd honestly call watching strangers' pleasure research. And I actually believe you. Dawn got pregnant, which threw me off. Not because of the baby itself, but because it disrupted my idea of an ideal relationship path. Dating, living together, marriage, then kids. It took 2 weeks to convince her, but she finally agreed, and we headed to the courthouse. That year was incredible for me. Dawn became my wife, and our daughter was born. With our daughter's arrival, Dawn and I had our first serious disagreement. She wanted a home birth. Anthony, I want her born here, in a place of love, next to where she'll sleep and eat, she argued. Dawn, you don't even like cooking, but you want to give birth in the kitchen? I replied, trying to stay rational. Our daughter's presence filled me with purpose, and I threw myself into learning about parenting. I consulted child psychologists and read everything I could. Dawn, however, grew tired of my constant suggestions, so I took on most of the parenting. She wasn't uninvolved, but she left the day-to-day things like zoo trips and concerts to me while staying active on campus. Years flew by. After earning my doctorate, I got recruited by a top hedge fund on Wall Street. They were looking for geniuses who could make 2 + 2 = 5. I enjoyed the work, a giant 3D puzzle where we could turn 2 + 2 into 9 under certain accounting tricks. Though the pay was high, money never motivated me. The thrill of solving complex problems did. They say a poor man wants to be rich, a rich man wants to be a king, and a king wants everything. I could see that Wall Street was just a rigged game, but if the money made Dawn and my daughter happy, then I was content too. It never crossed my mind that Dawn might cheat. Sure, we had late nights here and there, but she was busy with her activism, now focused on environmental issues like saving endangered animals. Anthony, she'd say, humans are the biggest threat to blue whales. True, I'd reply, but who else would hunt a blue whale? Pelicans with machine tools? Lions on jet skis? Then there was her approach to climate change. Dawn, I asked one day, don't you think it's odd to drive a Cadillac Escalade to a Save the Planet rally? She looked at me unfazed. It's a hybrid, very economical. The engine even shuts off when I'm stopped. I couldn't help but joke. My grandfather's car did that too. They called it stalling. Anthony, this is about reducing our carbon footprint, she insisted. I pulled up some facts on my laptop. That Escalade's carbon footprint, just from production alone, is massive. She threw her hands up. What should I drive then? A Volkswagen Jetta? It's safe, and the diesel version has better mileage than your SUV, I pointed out. But Dawn's spending never stopped. She'd come home with expensive designer dresses, always saying, it looks so much better on. I thought, on fire, but kept it to myself. When our son was born, I was thrilled. He and his sister were both overjoyed. But then the housing bubble burst, and Dawn's lifestyle took a hit. Like most Americans, we didn't get any government help. Just the too-big-to-fail corporations did. We moved south, where I found work at a small bank. My salary dropped significantly, and our house was suddenly worth less than our mortgage. We left behind European trips, private schools, luxury cars, and even Starbucks. I was proud of how well the kids adapted. My daughter loved public school, and my son enjoyed having a big yard. Life at the small bank was easier, and the people were kind. But it was clear Dawn was unhappy. I hadn't realized how unhappy she was until I found her in our bedroom, packing a suitcase, 8 months after we'd moved. Dawn, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Looks like you're going on a trip. I can't get a week off until I've worked a full year at the bank. Without pausing, Dawn pulled out another suitcase. I'm heading to Manhattan to support the Occupy Wall Street protest. I blinked. Dawn, we can't just leave right now. It's the middle of the school year, and I've just finished probation at work. Plus, we're tight on money. She kept folding clothes, unfazed. I don't care. Occupy Wall Street needs me. I'll only be gone a few weeks. But we need you here, I countered, desperation creeping into my voice. What about the kids? Dawn shot me a dismissive look. Don't be such a child, Anthony. Our daughter can handle herself after school, and Janet from the bank has a nanny who can watch both her child and our son until you're home. Dawn, you're not a soldier, and Occupy Wall Street isn't a war, I argued, trying to appeal to reason. She waved me off. Anthony, they need me. It's my calling. I took a deep breath, trying a different tack. Dawn, you're not going to lead a crowd. Studies show that group identity just activates pleasure centers, making people stop thinking critically. She snapped her suitcase shut, her expression hardening. Stop arguing, Anthony. You won't win this. I met her gaze, my voice low. Any spouse can win if they're willing to go far enough. That's called divorce. Her face softened, surprised. We're not going to be part of the 50% that end in divorce. Maybe not, I replied quietly. But the other 50% end until death do us part. Dawn glanced down at the suitcase, hesitating. Your car's tires won't even make it to New York. I was planning to replace them next paycheck, I pointed out. She shook her head, lifting her bags. I'm not taking the car. I found a ride with someone I met online. I looked at her, incredulous. And how exactly will you pay him? We barely have enough as it is. She shrugged. We'll work something out. I sat there, speechless. I didn't even hear her leave. She didn't kiss the kids goodbye. When they asked, I told them she was at a rally up north, not sure when she'd be back. Soon the media picked up the story of a banker's wife joining Occupy Wall Street, dubbing her Aku Mama. Even in our small town, it stirred things up. Dad, my son asked. What's how? Son, How is a garden tool like a rake? I answered, keeping it simple. My son looked confused. Then why are kids at school saying mom's a garden rake? My daughter came in. They mean hoe, like a promiscuous. My son looked to me. Dad, what's a hoe? And why are they calling mom that? Your mom's not a promiscuous, and that's a bad word, I said, sending him outside to play. After my son left, my daughter sat down, visibly upset. Dad, you have to do something about mom. She's ruining my reputation at school. Do you even know what people are saying about us? She asked, frustration written on her face. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Sweetheart, we can't control what people say. And honestly, most people probably aren't even thinking about us. Dad, she said, her voice heavy with teenage exasperation. Aren't you even a little bothered that mom is living with some random guy in a tent? It's all over the internet. If it bothers you, just stay offline, I suggested. She shook her head. It's not that easy. My friends keep sending me links, and it's gross. You have to do something. I leaned in, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'll take care of it, honey. After days of leaving messages, I finally reached Dawn. Anthony, I'm sorry for not calling sooner, she said, sounding harried. It's been chaos here. Dawn, save the apologies. You didn't even call back. I had to reach out. You don't understand what's happening here, Anthony, she replied defensively. Then maybe stop telling everyone about it, I said. Most people either don't care or are just relieved it's not their problem, she sighed. You really don't get it. There are thousands of us here, regular folks, even celebrities. Are there any other mothers who left their families to be there? I asked pointedly. Stop being so dramatic, she shot back. You act like toilet paper and aluminum foil mean more to me than my family. Dawn, toilet paper matters to a lot of people. And how are we your priority when you're living in a tent with some other guy? She let out an exasperated breath. Don't be ridiculous, Anthony. We're just sharing a tent. It's not like we're sleeping together. Really? I said, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice, because his blog post titled Occupying the OccuMilf Cape suggests otherwise. Anthony, you actually believe everything you read online? He's just exaggerating, she protested. Dawn, I said, struggling to stay calm, when he describes the mole on your inner thigh in detail, it's hard to believe he's making it up. You need to come home. She paused, then conceded. Fine, I'll consider marriage counseling. But I'm not going to listen to some Bible-thumping counselor telling me to obey you and stay home. Dawn, I never asked for that. Just come home. I can't leave right now. This is too important. I checked my watch, my patience wearing thin. There's a midnight bus ticket waiting for you. If you're not on it, I'll be filing for divorce. Anthony, I'm a crucial part of this movement, she protested. Dawn, I replied coolly, don't confuse running in circles with progress. Be on the bus. Predictably, Dawn didn't get on the bus. A week later, she called, furious. Anthony, how could you file for divorce? And those photos in the paperwork? What if the kids saw them? I kept my voice steady. Now you're worried about the kids? They're the ones who showed me the photos. Your tent mate posted them online, and our daughter heard about it at school. I just printed them out. She softened a little. Look, Anthony, I'm sorry. I got caught up in the moment. How long was that moment? Dawn? I sent you 7 photos with dates from 7 different nights. There was a pause before she said, all right, maybe sleeping with him wasn't the smartest decision, but it was just one guy. I let out a disbelieving laugh. And what does the number of partners have to do with anything? Through the static of background noise, she continued, "Put this in perspective, Anthony. Is my little affair worth losing everything? This doesn't have to be an execution for our marriage. People go through these things. It could even make us stronger." "Dawn," I replied, my patience gone. "That logic makes as much sense as Yogi Berra saying, if you don't go to other people's funerals, they won't come to yours." I switched the phone to my other ear as she continued. "Listen, I have a guy here with me whose father owns one of the biggest law firms in the state. He said if you keep pushing this divorce nonsense, you'll get sued." Then I heard a man's voice on the line. "Hello? Can you hear me, Anthony?" "Yes, I hear you," I replied. "Listen, buddy, you're handling this all wrong," he said. "I work for a big law firm, and every day I see guys like you chewed up and spat out by the courts. If I represent your wife, you're done for. Do you even know who my father is?" It was a bizarre conversation, but I responded, "Sorry, man, I have no clue who your father is. Didn't your mother tell you?" "What?" hissed the voice on the line. I kept my tone calm. "Maybe your mom had a lot of partners, and that's why it's hard to know. I don't know you, but I could try to help. Do you have any specific traits like African American, Hispanic, or Asian?" "You idiot!" he shouted back. "My family's been here since this country was a colony." "Why are you angry at me?" I asked evenly. "I'm just trying to help. And besides, it wasn't my mom who might have had multiple partners before I was born. Maybe you should check if she lived near a military or naval base at the time. The government keeps a DNA database. You could look there to see who she might have picked as a donor." "I'm going to wipe the courthouse floor with you," he exploded. And then I heard a shuffling sound as Dawn must have taken the phone from him. "Anthony, are you still there?" she asked, her voice more restrained. "Yes, Dawn, I'm here. Are you sure this is the guy you want representing you in our divorce? He seems pretty unstable, maybe because he doesn't know who his father is. Forget him, Anthony, and forget the divorce. Every couple has a slip-up at some point. Everyone does it. Nobody cares anymore." "You're wrong, Dawn. According to a recent Gallup poll, having an affair is considered one of the most immoral acts. Out of 1,535 American adults, 91% believe infidelity is morally wrong, more than they object to human cloning, self-destruction, or polygamy. Only 9% think it's acceptable. Sure, we're more open to divorce, premarital sex, and children out of wedlock, but about 24 states still criminalize infidelity." "Damn you, Anthony. Divorce is not an option," she snapped. "Dawn, there are no right answers to wrong questions," I replied calmly. She spat back, "Fine, Anthony. Want to bet? I'll ruin you for this. Remember, whoever came with a knife will die by the knife." I blinked, baffled. "What does cutlery have to do with our divorce, Dawn?" A stream of curse words came through the line before it went dead. In the end, Dawn cleaned me out during the divorce, and her lawyer truly wiped the floor with me. Apparently, our state is one of the few with lifelong alimony. Her lawyer used that, along with my previous income, to seize my retirement, home equity, savings, and any cash. But they were both surprised when I didn't care about any of that. I traded it all for sole custody of my children. As far as I saw it, Dawn may have won the battle, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. Dawn's involvement in the Wall Street protests brought her some temporary fame. After our divorce, my daughter showed me a press release. Dawn had secured a book deal with a possible film adaptation. Her advance was substantial, which explained why she didn't push for alimony, though it didn't explain why she drained my accounts and pleaded poverty about child support. Dawn's fame quickly turned into small-town resentment toward me. I hadn't expected my colleagues or the town to react the way they did. Janet, the single mom and bank teller I shared a nanny with, explained it. "You might not see it, Anthony, but there's still a lot of old-school machismo here from both men and women. Janet, what did they expect me to do? Touch my ex-wife? That's just not who I am." Janet patted my shoulder. "I get it. None of this is your fault. Your ex, Dawn, isn't exactly stable. Honestly, with all the therapists, meds, and self-help, I bet a quarter of women in this country are on some kind of mental health treatment." I thought about it. Wow, Janet, that means 75% of women are walking around with untreated mental illness. For some reason, Janet smacked my shoulder hard, muttering something about how we're all alike. Rubbing my shoulder, I continued, "I really don't care what people think, except what does my personal life have to do with my job? We're in a bank, Anthony. People want to feel confident about where they keep their money and who they work with. Some folks think if you can't keep your own family together, how can you manage their finances?" Maybe Janet had a point, but it didn't matter to me. My job was just a means to support my family. But as a result, several clients refused to work with me, and my manager bluntly told me that they didn't want weak people affecting business. So even though I was qualified, I was surprised when the bank manager came to my small office one day before closing. "Tomorrow, you're in charge," he said. "This is your responsibility. These are your employees. They're your responsibility." He looked up before closing the folder in his hand. "Try not to let any of them leave or let you down." The next morning, an elderly guard let me in. I greeted my team as they arrived, and after a quick check around, I stepped into the men's room. When I came back out, I was stunned. 2 men in ski masks were in the lobby, with my employees lined up against the wall. Some were visibly shaking, and one woman had a large stain on her pants. One of the men held a tool to the head of the elderly guard. The other, holding what looked like an explosive device, yelled, "Are you the damn manager?" "Yes, I'm acting manager this morning," I replied, trying to recall the procedures for a robbery. "I assume you're here to take bank funds. Otherwise, you'll need to come back during regular hours when our full-time manager is here." The man grabbed me by my tie, yanking me toward him, shaking the bomb in my face. "Are you some kind of comedian?" he spat, tightening the tie and shoving me to the floor. Slowly, I got up, loosening the tie that had pinned me down. I hated wearing ties. They originated in Croatia in the Middle Ages, worn by men to show loyalty to their king. Why we still wore them now was beyond me. The robber yanked Janet out of the cashier line, wrapping an arm around her waist and holding the bomb close to her head. It looked like a grenade, though I couldn't tell if it was real or a fake. "Manager a hole," he shouted. "Are you listening? Give me all the money in the bank right now or I'll blow her head off." "Of course," I said, gesturing toward the storage room. "We haven't transferred the cash from storage yet, so it's all still there." "Then let's go," he ordered, pushing Janet forward. She stumbled, falling to the floor as he directed me to the back of the bank. We all ended up in the vault, just behind the safes, in a closed room with a barred door. The toolman left with a paper bag full of cash, while the bomber stayed at the vault door, blocking our exit. I could hear my employees' quiet sobs behind me. Once the first robber was clear, the bomber lifted the grenade with a smirk, then tossed it into the storage room. "Bye, suckers," he sneered before running off. I'd heard people say that time slows down in moments like this, but I'd never believed it. Time is constant. It doesn't speed up or slow down. Yet despite Einstein's theory, I experienced time dilation firsthand. In slow motion, the grenade rolled toward Janet's feet. I heard a cashier scream and saw another employee faint, falling slowly to the ground. "This is your responsibility. These are your employees. You are responsible for them." Those words flashed through my mind as I dropped to my knees and lunged for the grenade, shoving Janet aside. I felt like I was moving through syrup, my hands appearing enormous like baseball mitts as I finally grabbed the grenade. I sprinted toward the vault exit, feeling as if I were running through quicksand. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the door and kicked it open, pulling it shut behind me. I knew that the century-old, cold-rolled steel vault door would protect everyone inside from the blast. Unfortunately, the door to the deposit room was shut, blocking my escape route. I noticed the display safe we used for demonstrations sitting open on the counter. Quickly, I shoved the grenade into the display safe and slammed it shut. Holding it with my left hand, I turned and wedged it into the open space in the wall among the bank's other safes. Suddenly, the world erupted into a blinding white light, and I was flung backward over the counter. When my vision cleared, a ringing filled my ears. Like thousands of bees were swarming around me. I realized I must be sitting on the ground because I saw Janet kneeling in front of me. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear anything. She reached out, loosened my tie, and wrapped it around my left arm. Looking up, I noticed a jagged hole where I'd placed the grenade. More employees gathered around, though I still couldn't hear them. I tried to stand, but my body felt like it weighed a ton. Janet gestured for me to stay down. Then she began unbuttoning her blouse. I briefly admired her firm C-cup chest in a white bra before she wrapped the blouse around my head. Her perfume filled my nose, a welcome change from the dust. I was trying to place the scent when I drifted into unconsciousness. When I woke, I realized I was in a hospital bed. My left arm and leg were both heavily bandaged. A man in a white coat stood beside me, jotting notes on a chart. "Welcome back, Rambo," he greeted me casually without even looking up. "I pulled a lot of fragments from your face and scalp, but it'll heal fine," he grinned. "Everything should be back to normal. Besides, chicks dig scars." He pointed his pen at me. "You also lost a couple of fingers and a thumb. The good news is the thumb's root was intact, so I reattached it. With rehab, you should regain about 80 to 85% mobility in that arm." He looked me over. "But I doubt you'll be playing the piano at Carnegie Hall." Confused, I replied, "Doc, I've never even played the piano, let alone at Carnegie Hall." He just shook his head. "Someone used your tie to stop the bleeding. Quick thinking, probably saved your life." With that, he hung my chart on the wall and walked out. I sensed movement on the other side of the bed and turned to see the bank manager standing there. "Anthony, you're one crazy son of a tool," he said, shaking his head. "I'd never have guessed you had it in you. The security footage caught the whole thing. It's like something out of a Bruce Willis movie." Running a hand over his thinning hair, he continued, "We're all really proud of you, and, well, sorry about the way things went down before. What with the divorce and all." After an awkward pause, he clapped his hands. "Of course, you're not the only one we're proud of." He pointed behind him and I saw Janet sitting nearby. The bank manager went on. "Janet slipped a couple of dye packs into the robber's bag. They didn't notice, and when the packs went off, dye covered them and their windshield. They lost control and crashed right into Creme Time Donut Shop." He chuckled. "Almost every cop in the county was there and they were promptly arrested." I'd tried to smile, but my face wouldn't cooperate. The manager looked over at Janet. "Janet, I have to get back to the grind. You'll keep an eye on Anthony, won't you?" Grabbing my shoulder, he added, "Take as much time as you need, Anthony. We've got you covered. We're all proud of you." After he left, Janet moved closer with a half smile. "Your kids are with mine and the nanny. Don't worry, they're having a blast, enjoying the fame of being the children of a local hero." She closed the door and came back to my bed, her half smile turning into a grin. "Die Hard, huh? More like Dumb and Dumber." She pointed at me, amused. "By the way, that was a flashbang, not a real grenade." In that moment, it all clicked. A standard M84 grenade, about 300 grams with a mix of magnesium and ammonium oxides. I shook my head, realizing. Janet shook hers too. If you hadn't gone full action hero, we'd have just ended up with a little ringing in our ears. I looked at my bandaged hand. "True," I said softly. Putting it in the safe deposit box turned a harmless flashbang into an actual threat. I knew I hadn't meant to put anyone in danger, but I still felt foolish. "I'm sorry, Janet. I didn't mean for things to go that way." She smiled. "Forget about the bank. This is the best publicity they've had in years." Leaning down, she kissed me. "Besides, you're my hero. I don't just take my top off for anyone." Janet wiped her lipstick from my lips. "You deserve to make people regret how they treated you. I still have friends in the sheriff's department, and everyone believes you saved us from a real bomb. They won't confirm it wasn't, but they won't deny it either." I pointed at her with my good hand. "But Janet, once this goes to court, the truth will come out," she laughed. "Those two idiots already accepted a plea deal. They'll never admit it was a flashbang. Their reputation in prison is better if people think they were big-time criminals." She winked. "You might even get to be Grand Marshal in this year's city parade." I shrugged. It didn't feel fair, but I didn't mind. Janet squeezed my thigh. "Besides, you owe me a blouse, and the bank owes you a reward, and I plan on collecting." I never did get around to buying her that blouse. She even refused my offer to split the reward. My kids spent almost all their time at her place during my hospital stay, and she wouldn't accept a penny for expenses. "Put it all away, Anthony," she said firmly when I tried to hand her some cash. "Two boys keep each other entertained, and your daughter is the girl I always wanted." I knew better than to argue, but I was already mentally figuring out how to set up a college fund for Janet's kids. As we rounded the corner to her house, I was surprised to see a stretch limo parked out front, and even more surprised to see my ex-wife, Dawn, standing on the porch with another woman. Janet muttered, "Looks like a village is missing its idiot." After helping me out of the car, Dawn rushed over. "Oh my God," she gasped, holding her arms open. "I came as soon as I heard. I barely managed to arrange a plane and limo." She hugged me tightly, but I barely responded. When she pulled back, I caught a flicker in her eyes as she looked me over. I knew I'd put on some weight, but unlike most divorced men, I hadn't thrown myself into an intense fitness routine. My job and lifestyle had left me a bit soft around the edges. "Well, Anthony," she said, gesturing to my stomach, "don't worry. I have a new diet plan to get you back in shape." I wasn't interested. The diet industry sells products with a 98% failure rate. Most people regain the weight within 5 years. I shrugged. "Besides, I'm already in fighting shape. I'm too heavy to run away from a fight." Dawn laughed awkwardly. Very funny. A little exercise will give you a whole new healthy life. Exhausted, I replied. Dawn, if walking and cycling were all it took, mail carriers would live forever. Whales swim constantly, eat only fish and drink water, yet they're still fat. Rabbits run around and only live about 15 years. Turtles do nothing, and they live over a century. Now tell me again why I should exercise. Dawn glanced at Janet, who stood nearby. I see where you get your codependent attitude about avoiding exercise. Janet narrowed her eyes. There's plenty of evidence that women with a few extra pounds live longer than those who diet obsessively. The stern-looking woman next to Dawn stepped forward and extended a hand. Hello, Anthony. I'm Dawn's publicist. We're all very excited about this opportunity. Dawn jumped in, beaming. It's the perfect ending to my story. I nurse you back to health. We rebuild our family. It's a made-for-TV story. Lifetime is thrilled. We might even get a series. Dawn extended her hand to me. This could mean a lot of money and fame for us. No, I replied firmly, keeping my voice steady. What? Dawn and her publicist exclaimed together. No, I repeated. Which part of no didn't you understand? The publicist quickly tried to smooth things over. Anthony, I'm on your side. You need to listen to Dawn. I shook my head. There's always someone on your side that you'd rather have on the other side. Ignoring me, the publicist continued. I know you've been through a trauma and might not be thinking clearly. With your recent head injury and the shock of your split with Dawn, your judgment may be off. Think carefully. Opportunities like this don't come around twice. Janet took my arm and guided me toward her door. She turned to the publicist. In this case, it would be better if you called ahead. We wouldn't want to embarrass you by not answering the door. Dawn jumped in front of me. Anthony, stop. What are you doing? We belong together. You need me. You know you'll never find anyone like me again. I looked at her for a long moment. Dawn, that doesn't make sense. I don't even like you. Why would I want to find someone like you? She tried again. The future isn't what it used to be, Anthony. This will be a best-selling book, a national TV show. Do you really want to be cast as the villainous husband? Dawn, even if you make a story out of this, no one, dog included, will care. Turning to Janet, Dawn tried a different approach. You're a Bible believer, right? Isn't there something in the Bible about forgiveness? Can't you help me here? Janet let go of my arm and faced Dawn and her publicist. I don't have a Bible verse, but I do have a line for Anthony. She pointed toward the street. Get out of my house. Dawn and her publicist stood there, stunned. You can't talk to me like that, Dawn stammered. Without looking back, Janet kept guiding me to the door. I'd shoot you both, but I don't want to waste bullets. She held up her phone. Uncle Bob, the city sheriff, is on my speed dial. Dawn and her publicist looked shocked. Janet continued, I have a loaded rifle, 3 acres of land, and a shovel. Don't mess with me or anyone I care about. Dawn's book quickly ended up in the clearance bin, and her movie bombed even worse. Her fame faded fast, though she still visited the kids occasionally, whenever it fit her schedule. Dawn's career could be tracked by the vehicles she arrived in. First, it was limos, then rental sedans, followed by taxis, and eventually shared rides in beat-up minivans. She still brought gifts and talked about projects in the works every visit, though the details became increasingly vague. The last time she visited, she was with an aging, unkempt actor who drove a rusty old Mercedes. My son caught a glimpse of her latest project, a low-budget reality show, on one of those obscure cable channels that catered to insomniacs. Janet couldn't resist a jab. Looks like Dawn has a case of vapitus lucatus, she quipped. What's that? I asked, genuinely curious. Janet grinned. It's a condition where people chase fame without real accomplishments. They end up on obscure cable channels, staying obscure, and sometimes appear in ads for reverse mortgages. The kids found it hilarious, though I wasn't sure vapitus lucatus was real. Still, Janet's dry humor brought us all a good laugh. Over time, Janet and I grew closer. I was pleasantly surprised to meet her brother and discover he was also on the spectrum, which explained her understanding and patience. Eventually, we began dating. It felt like the natural next step. We had a lot in common, and merging our families allowed us to live comfortably. My kids adored Janet, and so did I. One day, I was even asked to ride on the main float in the town's Founders' Day parade. Reflecting on everything, I realized an important truth. People often think you need money to be rich, but true wealth isn't about money. It's about who you have in your life, not what you own. Reflecting on those years, I find myself grateful for the unexpected twists that define my life. From a rocky childhood of misunderstood intentions to a series of intense, often surreal encounters, each challenge brought its own lessons. In my earlier years, I had always felt separate, as if I were navigating a world that rarely fit my understanding. Yet through each encounter, from confrontations in the bank to standoffs in personal relationships, I've come to appreciate the strength and resilience that come with living authentically, Asperger's quirks and all. After the chaos, there was Janet. Her steady presence grounded me, bringing warmth and acceptance I never anticipated. The calm after the storm, she reminded me that genuine connections are possible, even for someone like me who has always viewed the world a bit differently. We shared more than laughs. She understood my struggles and saw beyond my straightforward, literal responses, connecting with the deeper, compassionate side I rarely allowed others to see. Her patience and humor didn't just brighten my life. They became a lifeline as I rebuilt. The kids, too, became a source of pride and purpose. Watching them thrive reminded me of the value in every little moment, the subtle joys often overlooked. We built a routine in a new town, where life felt simpler, more genuine. With each passing day, I saw my role as their father not merely as a duty, but as a privilege, an opportunity to help them find the balance between logic and emotion, between stability and spontaneity, that took me decades to uncover. Now, life is far from perfect, but it is richer than I ever imagined. I find joy in the everyday, small conversations, family dinners, even the occasional parade float in a town that has come to see me as one of its own. Money and fame, once tempting goals, have little appeal. True wealth, I've realized, is woven from the love and acceptance of those who stay by your side through the ups and downs, the ones who see your unique path and choose to walk alongside you.